Ciancórla, and I welcome the opportunity to take part in this debate and that the Minister is still here. And I welcome his written speech, and he has set out various issues which I hope I get a chance to look at, including equality in the workplace and carers, children, etc. And then he goes on to use this opportunity to say yes, yes in the referendum. So I might come back to that. This is my 8th year doing statements, and I acknowledge some progress has been made in that time. I acknowledge the extra money gone into childcare. I acknowledge the progress in relation to the 3rd National Strategy on Violence, and I acknowledge that a new agency has been set up. But Minister, let's see what those words actually mean. We're putting more and more money into a for-profit system in the private market for children. We are putting less emphasis on the importance of stability in a home, whether that's run by a mother or father. And we're putting a huge effort into the privatisation of childcare with public money. We've done this with direct provision, we've done this with housing, and we're doing it with childcare. So I would love and I would work with you to push out a public childcare system that fathers and mothers could use as necessary. If they decide to stay at home, one of them, for some time and use the public system, so be it, and vice versa. So you talk about, I mentioned the progress with the agency set up. That agency has been set up with the background of 11 women died in violent circumstances. 11 women in 2022, almost 1 woman a month. The worst year in a decade for violence against women. Between 1996 and the 16th of January 24, 265 women died. 171 of these in their own home, obviously by somebody they knew, and yet we have all of this diatribe and a narrative about foreigners, when most of the murders are committed by husbands, partners, or men that we know. We have failed to introduce legislation for homicide reviews as we promised. We're having this debate in the context of women and narrowing the gender gap, and the gender gap which is very much mixed up with race, with disability and with minority groups. All of it tied together. And when we do that, we look at that, and you talk about the gender gap, which I welcome, and reducing it. The most fundamental thing has been left out, and that's the importance of a home. And just yesterday or the day before in my office, I had a woman and her husband come in, parents, and the joy on their face after getting a home, what it meant to that family. The most basic thing, shelter, security for life, we've utterly failed to give. And so in January, and the figures have gone up, 13,531 people homeless. Of those, 4,000 were women and 3,036 were children. The UN Secretary General, who has been very forthcoming on different things, including Gaza, which I hope to get to in my last minute. He said last year that global progress on women's rights is vanishing before our eyes, and that on the current track, gender equality is still 300 years away. In the Galway Joint Policing Committee, of which I'm a member, for Galway Division, a year-on-year comparison of domestic abuse figures shows an increase of 19%, 2,633 incidents. And notice we talk about violence as domestic violence, as if to lessen it, and incidents rather than what it is, violence, assault, rape, and so on. We use softer language. Then we brought in the mother and baby home, and we exclude almost as many as we include or more, by an arbitrary decision, 6 months. Totally unjust, no equality there. And again, an absolute, what would you say, ignoring of the bond between mother and child. Completely ignored. It didn't matter. I remember saying to Deputy Sherlock with his new baby, he wasted 6 months of his life going up to that baby when the baby was crying, because according to the government's philosophy, the first 6 months doesn't matter. It's a tabula rasa, and they're utterly ignored. And then we come to the women of honour. And from 1990 up to today, it has taken 34 years to listen to them. It has taken programmes, commissions and all sorts of things to listen to what the women were telling us, and also the good men in the army. Nobody listened to them. We have a review of the Criminal Law Sexual Offences Act. 17, you're in breach of your statutory obligation. No review of those vulnerable women. Those vulnerable women where we've criminalised the men for the purchase of sex, endangering the women, a statutory obligation to carry out a review by 2020, not carried out ever. And then we turn to Gaza on International Women's Day. And what do we find? The figures are just, I don't even want to read them out because it seems to lessen the enormity of it. Men, women and children, 25,000, I understand, is the figure, between 20 and 25,000 women and children. It takes courageous Israeli soldiers to kill that many women and children. I say absolutely tongue-in-cheek. And I have an article here from The Guardian with 40 seconds to read it, which I can't. Mothers giving birth with no medical help, babies without milk, one toilet between 500 people. And it goes on to say sometimes a disaster is so large that it obscures its own details. And it gives all of the details that we just don't want to talk about here. And we have to preface everything by saying, I condemn the attack by Hamas. Absolutely. But what has happened in our name, which the government has stood with, albeit intermittent, very, very strong statements with no action. So on International Women's Day, I stand with the women in Gaza. I stand with the women in the Ukraine. I deplore all wars. And women, if they go into politics, should go in to make a difference, not just to adopt the male patriarchal role, which has happened in relation to this referendum, which does not state that the woman's role is in the home. And now we have parties and women adopting the patriarchal, patronising approach that was adopted by men, which we objected to, telling us they know best and this is for good. I would say to everybody in this House that's advocating a yes vote on the carers that they read what they're actually saying yes to, and I would be saying a firm no on that one.